Welcome back, Agriscience students. We are going to begin a new unit today. We're probably going to spend about 3 weeks on this unit. If you're looking in your course pack, it's not the very next one in your course pack. You're going to have to flip back a few pages. This is one of those situations where we're having to kind of plan our learning around the weather. And so because the weather is changing, want to make sure that we get in all this environmental stuff before it gets to a point where the weather's not ideal for it anymore. So we're going to first talk today about some careers in environmental science. So whenever we're talking about environmental science, we're really talking about things that have to do with water, air, soil, trees, plants, wildlife, anything that's actually in our natural resources environment. And so when we're looking specifically at the career areas, there are about 4 career areas where you kind of categorize everything into. And so the first one is going to be water resources. So these would be people who would concentrate on things that are actual bodies of water, but also things that are growing within the water, whether it be people who work as oceanographers or people who do water testing on creeks and streams. So all these people would be ones who are doing things that either are in or around water. Soil resources, these people typically are looking at the various layers of soil and what soils are actually good for. As we go throughout the course of this unit, we will talk a little bit about soil judging. There is actually a land judging competition that is sponsored through FFA, and you learn a lot about different types of soils just by doing that competition. And there are a lot of things that you can analyze just as any regular old person, that you can analyze about the soil and figure out, is this soil better for something like pasture land? Is it okay for building a house on? And so the second area of careers with environmental science is going to be soil resources. Then, of course, you have those people who prefer to work in areas where maybe they're working with wildlife, and this could include people who are game wardens, people who work for fisheries. We have a gentleman that we've been in contact with that is supposed to be hatching some catfish out to bring to our aquaponics system. So he actually works for the North Carolina Fish Hatchery. So, it could be anything from 4-legged wildlife to 2-legged feathered wildlife to fish that don't have legs at all. So, we're looking at anything that has to do with game type animals. And finally, the fourth area of careers has to do with forestry. And the very last section of this unit, we will spend talking a lot about forestry. Forestry is extremely important resource, especially in our part of the state. As you get up into the even more westerly parts of the state, you're looking at things like Christmas tree growth. And so, we're looking at an area of the state where there's a lot of forestry. And so with this particular job area, you're looking at people who would potentially grow seedlings, who would be somebody who would potentially harvest, replant seedlings, make paper, and the possibilities there are endless. The next slide just gives you a pretty comprehensive list of some careers in environmental science, and I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but there are a few on upcoming slides that we'll talk a little bit about. You've got people who work as soil conservationists and soil scientists, and both of these are going to be people that actually look at the soil, what it's good for, what it's best used for, to help people who are landowners to figure out what to do with their soil. How can they actually make it better? Are there things they can add to it to make it more nutritious? Silviculturists are going to be people who manage forest, and so they might not necessarily be out there cutting trees, but they're going to be somebody that could come in and give you advice on how you would actually manage a forest. A forestry consultant pretty much does the same thing, except they are working more on a applied level. So whereas silviculturist is actually looking at the scientific aspect of things, and they're looking at the growth of specific types of trees and things that may be involved within the forest, a consultant is going to be somebody who really is going to come in there and actually give you advice based on what a silviculturist might say. A logger is going to be somebody who harvests trees. An urban forester is going to be somebody who actually looks at trees within cities. And so most of the time you think about cities as just being buildings, but if you think about downtown areas and court square areas and park areas, there are some urban areas that actually do have trees. A wildlife biologist is going to be somebody who does research on wildlife, whether it be their habitats, whether it be their breeding patterns, whether it be their migration patterns, and they're going to look at those different types of things within wildlife. A wildlife manager is going to typically be somebody who helps to manage game populations. It's not as intense degree wise as a wildlife biologist. A wildlife biologist is typically going to need a 4-year degree, whereas a wildlife manager or it may just be somebody that works in a national park that may have some training or a 2-year degree. A wildlife officer or game warden is actually going to work for the Wildlife Commission, and they are going to be those people that help to control the harvesting of wildlife to make sure that we are doing that in a responsible manner. Soil technicians will typically work with some soil conservationists and soil scientists in order to help take samples of the soil. They will use an auger, and they'll actually go out and take samples of the soil. I do have an auger, and those of you who are in cohort A or B, we will be doing some soil analysis, probably not the first week of the unit, but maybe the second week of the unit. And we'll be taking a look at some different types of soils. A wildlife technician would be somebody who would actually tag animals and gather data from those animals. And an ecologist is going to be somebody who pretty much studies the entire environment and how that entire environment affects the animal and even plant life that lives in a particular area. Last slide. A forester is going to help to manage forest for a private landowner or for commercial growers. Very similar to the forest consultant that we were talking about a while ago. A timber cruiser is going to be somebody who actually goes out and looks at a forest and basically gives you an estimate of how much lumber is available and potentially how much you could actually sell that for. A logging foreman is actually going to be somebody who comes in and helps to harvest the trees. We saw a logger on one of the other slides just a little bit back, pretty much the same thing. It's just that the logging foreman is going to be basically a supervisor for those loggers. And then you've got skidder operators who are actually going to move trees from one particular site in a cutting area to a loading area so that they can be taken from the woods. So these are just a few jobs that are available in environmental science. There are lots of jobs that are out there, especially for those people who really like being outdoors and you just know that you don't want to be stuck in a building one day and you want to work outside, some jobs in environmental science might be something that you want to look into. If you're interested in jobs in environmental science, let me know. We could talk about some ideas and some directions you might want to go beginning now so that you can go into the area that you want to go into in the future. So next time, we're going to talk a little bit about some environmental biotechnology. We'll have a little bit of career stuff and a little bit of biotechnology stuff in every unit. And so we're kind of getting started with all that stuff. So careers today, next time, environmental biotechnology, and I will talk to you very soon.